Welcome back to Right on Four Corners. I'm your host, DelSheree Spinner. I am an English teacher and a novelist, and I am excited to have Karen McCoy back on the show. We are going to be talking about her book, The Etiquette of Voles, and the reason she's coming back on is to talk about the audiobook that was just done and kind of what that process was like and just her experience. Audiobooks are a huge part of the book market right now, growing a lot, and so this is something that both readers and other writers hopefully will find interesting to learn more about this. So Karen, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes, hi, my name is Karen McCoy. I am delighted to be back on this wonderful podcast. I think it's doing a lot of great things. As a reminder, I am both a writer and a librarian. My first library job was actually at the Farmington Public Library, and my husband grew up in that area, and he's from Aztec, so I have a soft spot for that area for sure. And The Etiquette of Voles is not my first book, but is my first published manuscript, which came out last year. And the audiobook just debuted on March 31st of this year.
And this is fun because even though audiobook creation is becoming a bit more accessible, particularly the AI front, more people are kind of testing that out. On the reader side, on the author side, there's some interesting kind of dynamics there. But not every book gets turned into an audiobook, particularly with smaller publishing houses. And you're with Artemisia Publishing here in New Mexico. So tell us how you took the next step and what that was like in conversation with Jeff of which book is going to get moved forward, because I know resource-wise, you can't do that with every book as a small press. Just talk about a little bit the conversation and what that was like about whether to invest in doing the audiobook.
Yeah, well, first of all, Jeff is great to work with. I've been very happy with my experience at Artemisia. And I basically just said, hey, it would be really great if this could happen, but I also understand that you're a small press and that's not always doable, but I'm really willing to do as much publicity for this book as needed. And what do you think about that? And then he put me in touch with a company called Pro Audio, who he works with, and Pro Audio has done books with Artemisia before. And Marcus Mulenga was the representative from Pro Audio who reached out to me. And then we started discussing things like pronunciation guides, like how to say certain character names and various things. And he also sent me 5 audio files of different actors so that I could listen to which narrator I liked the best.
So did you end up having basically like final say on choosing which narrator?
Yes.
Oh, that's good.
Yes, I did, especially because one of the auditions, I'd say who it was had the vole in a teeny tiny little voice, and I was pretty much like, next. So,
not the right fit.
But I landed on this really great voice actor named Tristan Wright. That's Wright. And he did such a good job of bringing everybody to life. And so basically for the auditions, I think like the first 2 minutes or the first 5 minutes or something. And then once I picked Tristan, he went ahead and sent the first 2 chapters. And then I could assess, if there was anything that I wanted changed. For example, the orphan Daniel on one of the original recordings sounded a little too like, please, sir, can I have some more? And that was a little too, I wanted his voice to be just a little bit lower. And so we kind of made those kinds of adjustments. And then what ended up happening after that is once we figured those kinds of things out and pronunciation guides and things, it was a few months later. And then I got the recordings for all the rest of the chapters. And I basically listened to each one, made notes in an Excel that Marcus had given me, basically saying at this point, like on this minute and this wording, and then the things that I thought, needed changing or needed adjusting. But there actually wasn't a lot. Tristan did a really great job.
I can imagine that. It can be a little bit time consuming going back through and marking every little thing. But that's nice that it wasn't a crazy long thing.
Yeah. It wasn't a crazy long thing, and it was a really fun process, actually. Yeah, of course, I was a little intimidated. It was like, oh, wow, this is a lot of chapters to read. I hope I can get through them all. It was more of that kind of thing rather than, oh, God, I have to do this kind of a thing. What was really interesting to me when I listened to it, especially in this British voice, it was almost as if like the words were not just mine anymore. They had kind of transcended to this new place. It was almost like reading a audiobook and like another author, had written and such. So it was interesting because I felt like, oh, hey, this can sit alongside all the other real-time audiobooks. And so that's nice.
Well, it's such an interesting experience anytime you kind of put a creative work out into the world. Like you lose a
Yeah.
certain amount of control over it. People are
Yeah.
going to read it and experience it in different ways. And then you add this layer of audio with the narrator's kind of interpretation and inflection and how they do the voices. And that may, hopefully, like it ends up somewhat close to what the author was imagining, but
Well, and
it may
not only did it, well, actually, there were two things that happened. One was I was like, oh, hey, this writing isn't so terrible. So that's neat because, you look at your own writing in print and of course we're all our own critics, right? But when I heard it, I was like, oh yeah, okay, this is fine. And the other thing, which I thought was really great, was even for the things that I didn't expect and weren't exactly aligned, I thought that the narrator actually enhanced what I had already established, even if it was different from what I expected. So if anything, it was like my book was expanded upon rather than taken away from, if that makes sense.
Oh, that's really cool. I don't know how much audiobooks, like if you're a big audiobook person, but I listen to a ton of them as well as endless podcasts.
Yeah, I love audiobooks. I read all forms. I read print, I read ebook, I read audiobook. There was a really great middle grade series that I listened to on audiobook. It's called Sir Callie and the Champions of Helston. That's the first in a series of 4 books. And it's basically kind of medieval middle grade and it's tons of fun. And so I did that on audiobook and I really enjoyed that as well. So yeah, I love audiobooks and I love them as a format. Yeah, I love when books come to people in different ways. And so I think that's really great. With the print book, it's been interesting because I don't always hear back from readers. At the college where I work at, of course, the library bought my book for the collection, which is very kind of them. And a student read my book and she approached me and she said, I could not put your book down. And the only reason I had to put it down at chapter 12 is because they had to go to class. And then she proceeded to finish the book and tell me I did not see that plot twist coming. And then when I reread the beginning of the book, I saw the seeds that you planted. And I've always wanted as a writer to be able to do that successfully. So to know that that landed in the way that I intended was really awesome to hear.
That is really neat. That is a fun experience to reread. And it's not something like I typically did a lot of, like, I didn't usually reread a lot of books. However, like teaching in the books I teach, I end up reading them about 10 times per semester, which gets to be a little bit a lot sometimes.
Yeah.
It was funny seeing that with my students this year, the book we read. It was like foreshadowing is something that, like, it's one of the things kind of like cover it if you have time. And we finished the book we were reading. And I had like an extra day kind of in between when testing was going to start. And I was like, okay, we're going to do foreshadowing. So I gave them a bunch of page numbers that I had kept track of as we were going through the book and told them to go back and find all of the times that she told them what the ending was going to be that they didn't see the first time. It was fun to see them be like, oh my gosh, she did actually tell us what the ending was. It was right here the whole time.
That's fantastic. I love that.
So I'm glad you got to experience that because that is a lot of fun to see, like those lights go on in a reader's head and just be like,
absolutely.
Like this was actually planned. She knew what she's doing.
Yeah. Well, and anything as a process, sometimes I'll discover things late in the manuscript and then I'll have to backfill. But I don't mind that because usually it means that's something that I feel like my subconscious is a better writer than I am. And so I found that something that I had unintentionally planted, it's like, oh, it all fits together in this way. It doesn't always happen, but it's really lovely when it does.
It is nice when your subconscious helps you out like that and you come back to something and you're like, oh, that's what I was doing this whole time. Thank you.
Exactly.
Now, I'm curious with doing the audiobook. I think this is something I've noticed with different books, especially ones that I've read in print and listened to the audiobook. It's interesting because sometimes they don't always match up. And that could be either, just an error in the creation of the audiobook. They missed something and whatever. But I've had a couple that I've both read and listened to that there were changes made that seemed to be intentional to improve the listening experience. Like either adding or dropping dialogue tags and smoothing out maybe a difficult sentence that just, when you read it out loud, you stumble over it and it sounds weird. So things
Right.
like
Well,
that.
there were a couple of those that I was happy to make adjustments for, just for because it is a different medium. Basically, sentences that maybe were too complex and were easier digested reading wise, I was willing to adjust auditorily. If it was better simplified, then I was all for it.
Was that
That makes
something,
sense.
yeah, that like as you were listening back to the files that you
Hmm.
suggested, or were there
Yeah.
changes that the narrator made that you were like, oh, yeah, actually that does work better? How did that go with some of those?
Well, he was pretty spot on with being pretty exact, but there were a couple of places where I was like, yeah, I think it would be better if I was able to adjust the sentence on my end. And so they were able to accommodate that.
Oh, that's good. Well, I'm glad it was flexible. It's an interesting
Very much so. And
process.
absolutely. Well, I think the most challenging part for me, and other authors might feel the same way, is I feel privileged to have an audiobook in the first place. Just, having that space to make those corrections was a little daunting at first, but they were really receptive to what I had to say. And I didn't, I didn't give like a whole like paragraph or something of changes for a particular thing, but they were very receptive to my suggestions. So I was really happy about that. But yeah, it was a little daunting at first, for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine, yeah, going through that process the first time and just being like, "Oh, this is so exciting. Like this is so cool," and not wanting to
Hmm.
delay it or
Right.
make it complicated or anything like that. Of like, yeah,
Exactly.
that's probably fine. Let's just move on.
Yeah.
That would be
Well,
hard to speak
and
up.
none of us want to be quote unquote that author. Like we want to make sure that we're collaborative and good to work with and all this kind of stuff too. It's a balance.
There it is. Yeah, it was kind of interesting because a book that I listened to recently was one that I'd read in print first and then ended up listening to the audiobook as well. And there were just some like missed words and mistakes and things that I was like, I wonder if those just got missed or, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But then there were some sentences where like the emphasis or the inflection was wrong. And so it kind of changed the
Yes.
meaning of the sentence. And I was like, that's not what she said there. Like, that's not how that was
Right.
supposed to be read. And it kind of felt like the narrator was doing a cold read. Like they hadn't really, I guess, like read the chapter ahead to know what was going on and know where to put that inflection and emphasis. And so some of the sentences sometimes were just like, wait, what? Oh, that's not what that meant.
Yeah,
And
there were a couple of instances of sentences like that where the inflection, in one in particular, I really wanted emphasis on the word not, because there's a point in book one where I can tell this, it doesn't give away any spoilers, where Chains the bull is in hiding and this rich, well-to-do couple in London walks by and they're having this argument and she says, okay, we're not moving to the country. And that was how I had heard it in my head. But in the first go through, he didn't emphasize the not. And so I asked if he could do that the second time, and he did, and it was fantastic.
well, I'm glad you were able
Yeah.
to work with the company well and that they listened and were
Hmm.
receptive. 'Cause I do sometimes wonder when I listen to an audiobook where it was like, did the author
Hmm.
like feel uncomfortable speaking up or were they just like, here's your files, it's done, like move on?
Right. And it's impossible to know, right, on the back end. I just know what my experience was, and I was just really lucky that I had a lot of really good people and a lot of really great collaborators working with me on this whole thing.
Well, and you mentioned pronunciation guide earlier. I was trying to think, I was like, were there a lot of hard words in your book that would be challenging? Did you have to do a lot of corrections on that front? Because yours is set in
Yeah,
London.
it was mostly historical place names, which can sometimes be a bit tricky. In particular, the main river through London is the River Thames, but it's spelled Thames. And when I was little, I thought for years that it was pronounced Thames. And so there were a couple of times where in the narration there was too much of an A instead of an eh sound with Thames. And then, of course, certain names, character names like Shelby, I wanted to make sure that that was clear. So basically, it was another Excel chart that Marcus from Pro Audio sent me. And then basically, I could just find the different words that I thought would be challenging and then list those and then write out phonetically how that was supposed to sound.
I can imagine. I'm thinking who the last person was I talked to about an audiobook, and it was set here in San Juan County area. And so she'd
Hmm.
used a lot of both Spanish and various Native American words from several different tribes. And I remember that being a big
Mm.
headache for her, trying to get those words to be
Oh,
pronounced
yeah.
correctly, especially some of like the Dene language. She's like,
Yeah, well, yeah.
no.
Yeah. Yeah. And some of the language, especially the Dene languages, aren't always phonetically obvious to everyone else. So I'm really glad that she made that effort to make sure that those pronunciations were honored.
Well, it's kind of funny because it made me think about a couple of my books, and I haven't actually gotten to the point of doing audiobooks for any of them. It's been like on my never ending to do list for years. But as I've looked through them, I'm like,
We all had those to-do
oh
lists.
my gosh,
We all
yeah.
had, I call it the to-do list hydra, where I cross one off and then three more go back in its place.
Yes,
Like, it's
absolutely.
no shame.
Well, it's so funny because I'm thinking about for my own books what I wanted to do, and I was looking through and being like, okay, which one would I start with? Where would be the best place to start? Well, how about this? This one's a single narrator. Then I'm like, wait, one of the characters has an accent, and I don't want to deal with that right now. And I was like, looking over here, and I'm
Right.
like, dang it, that character has an accent. I was like, why did I write so many characters that have accents? What is
Yeah.
wrong with me?
Oh yeah, no, people. So what's been a really interesting thing that I did not expect is people always ask me, "Oh, well, didn't you read the book yourself?" And I said, "No, for some reason my vole is British, and that's what he wanted to be, and so that's what I did to myself, and I didn't want to, for lack of a better term, Dick Van Dyke it when I was reading, because I wanted to make sure that whoever narrated the book could have an authentic enough voice that even a British person could be like, okay, yeah, that's fine."
I'm curious, was your narrator doing an accent or was that just his normal voice?
As far as I understand, he is American, but he did a really good job with the British.
Oh, well, that's awesome. People who can do
Yeah,
accents, I'm like,
I know.
I can't even understand like how
I
you
know.
approach that and not end up sounding super goofy doing it.
Yeah, no, one reason I picked him is, one, I like the sound of his voice, and two, he had a really long and thick and very impressive resume. So he had a lot of experience in doing this kind of thing. It was really great that he was able to do it.
It's awesome. To be a little bit more technical for writers who may
Yeah.
be considering doing audiobook, with your process of going through this and then kind of back and forth, something with audiobooks is like looking at the word count and then the finished hours when it's all put together. So how long did the audiobook end up being? And like to give other authors an idea of the process of going through that, how long it took to get the recordings and then you to go through them. If someone wanted to start this process, how long would it take
Yeah.
and kind of what could their expectations be?
I would safely say, particularly because I know a lot of self-published authors, one of my self-published author friends kind of initiated, she didn't narrate books herself, but she reached out to a company that does that. I would allow yourself at least 4 to 6 months for the whole process, just because you need time to figure out your pronunciation guide. You need to give time for auditions so that you don't feel rushed in trying to pick somebody right away. You want the time for the narrator to narrate the book. And depending on how long the book is, now I'm lucky with middle grade that my book isn't as long as some others. I believe, and I'm trying to be exact here, but I might not be exactly exact. My understanding is that the final amount of hours, I believe, is 4 hours and 52 minutes for my entire book. But I know a lot of are longer. So I think just allowing at least a half a year, I think, is probably the best way if I were to suggest to somebody else. And again, everybody has different processes, but I'm not somebody who wants the added pressure of, oh my God, we have to do this yesterday on top of everything else.
Yeah, that makes everything more stressful when you, especially as I can't remember who I was listening to, and they put it, especially with indie authors who are setting their own timetables, where she was like, I see so many people who create these self-imposed deadlines. And then they're like panicking and freaking out because they set all these things up and they scheduled this. And it was like, no, this is when I have to release. And she'd be like, no, it's not. You made up that deadline. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah. So what was interesting about this process was it was probably, I had the finalized files sent back to Marcus around January of this year. And then it was actually up to Jeff as far as when it would release. And I think there were a couple of things he had to do on his end. And I'm a little fuzzy on what those are, but it ended up being March 31st as the final, debut thing. They had to figure out cover art and things like this because you have to have a square image. That was another thing that I hadn't thought about. And so it's basically a square image. And my illustrator had given me a square image for Instagram purposes, because what I also didn't know before posting to Instagram is Instagram only accepts square images. Luckily, I had one of those on hand. And then I think Jeff was able to embellish the blurb on it and say who the narrator was and things like this. So it's a slightly modified of my cover.
Yeah, and that makes me think, for someone who wants to go down this route, whether they're doing it with a publisher or on their own, it sounds like there's some things that you could kind of prepare ahead of time and have ready, like the square cover image, your pronunciation guide. What else would you recommend for an author to have prepared and be ready to go? Like if they're trying to work through this in a timely manner, for whatever reason, they might have a deadline. What would you suggest they have ready to go as they're approaching a company or a narrator to get this process going?
I think those are the main things, but also maybe doing a final, especially for self-published authors. I know a lot of self-published authors do have their books professionally edited, but maybe having somebody go through one last time and do like typos and things, because the last thing you want is for a narrator to narrate a typo and then you have to correct that kind of thing. But that's basically all a pronunciation guide and artwork. And that was basically in advance all I really needed to do.
That's good. I want to make sure, there wasn't some other surprise thing that they're like, oh yeah, and we need this. With the post-production part of this, so they send you the files, you go through, ask for any corrections, they make the corrections, send them back, and then everything needs to be processed and polished and meet all the technical requirements. I'm assuming you didn't really need to be involved in that, but did you listen to it one last time when they said, okay, cleaning up all of that's good?
I trusted the process. I said, you know what, as much as I love my book, it's kind of like when you get to the point where you've done a bunch of revisions, you're like, even I'm tired of hearing my own stuff. And I never wanted to have that relationship with it. So once it was around January where I could just kind of let it go out into the ether, and then I let Pro Audio and Artemisia do what they do best. And I'm really happy with it.
I'm glad you enjoyed the process. It wasn't too stressful or crazy, and that you were happy with the final product. I think that's the important part.
I've been happy with a lot of like I said, I'm really happy with my cover and my illustrations. And that's something that I feel like Jeff at Artemisia does really well, is that he has a really good balance of letting you decide what you want, but also with his expertise of, what will sell and what's marketable. I always felt really supported in all those processes with Artemisia.
And we are getting close to time, so I wanted to save a little bit to talk about, you are working on book 2, and just kind of
I am
where you're at with that, what you can share so far so people can keep an eye out.
Yeah, I can't share a lot because of spoilery things, but I will say there is a long journey that takes place, and I think that's about as specific as I want to get at this point. And my hope is to get it to Jeff in the next couple of weeks. I'm about halfway through the final draft of where I'm comfortable enough sending it to Artemisia and to Jeff to see what Jeff will say, and that will determine what happens next with it.
No particular dates yet, but it's in the works.
And we do
people
not.
keep an eye out.
And it's been really nice. It's been people, because even though the book 1 can stand alone, and I do kind of wrap up a lot of bows, if you will, in the plot, that did leave something kind of open-ended that will be explored in book 2. So I have had people asking me, is there a sequel? And that's been really nice to have people even ask that in the first place.
Yeah, no, they're interested in more and ready to keep an eye out. I know you were still going back and forth a little bit on the title. Do you have a title yet, or should people just keep an eye on your website?
I have a tentative title, but I don't want to say it aloud until I run it by Jeff.
That's fair. Totally understand. My books, I rarely even have a title till the whole thing's done, and then I'll still change it like 3 times.
Yeah, well, it's interesting about that because I had the hardest time finding a title for book one. I don't know if I talked about this in the last podcast that we did, but basically when I queried it, it was actually called Sir Vold. But then I thought, well, that sounds too medieval. And so basically Jeff encouraged me to kind of, bounce a couple of things around. And somehow one day the etiquette of Vold just came. Don't know from where, but I gave that to him and he said, that's perfect. And I said, really? It's not too many syllables? And he said, yeah. It's really hard to not overthink those kinds of things.
Definitely.
And I said, okay, I'm just going to trust. And I've gotten so many compliments on the title as well, which has been really nice.
Yeah, I really like it. And the way it stands out on the cover too, it balanced out really well. I thought it was really cute.
Yeah.
Good luck figuring out the title with book 2. I know what a pain that is.
Yes. I'm hoping it'll be something of something to kind of match with book 1, but I'm kind of spitballing one, but I'm not necessarily too attached to it. So if Jeff thinks it needs to be something else, I'll be okay with it.
Well, as someone who has boxed themselves into patterns with their titles, and it's caused a lot of headaches for me.
Oh, no.
Feel free to break out of that pattern. You might thank yourself a lot later on.
Okay, that's fair. I will keep that in mind for sure. I appreciate you sharing that experience for sure.
I could not write another Dig Shark book simply because there are no more phrases that have the word shark in them that would make any sense.
Oh no!
No, and I was really stretching toward the end. I was like, oh my gosh, why did I do this? Oh well, lessons learned.
Oh well. Yeah, I know. Like I said, sometimes the story wants what it wants, and it's just okay, writer, figure this out. Okay.
I'm sure you will figure it out, and luckily you don't have to include sharks in anything, so that's good.
Yes, we'll see. I'm not, adverse to whatever comes along.
We are at our time, and we're recording this on a Friday evening, and I know that we would both love to just go and relax and enjoy our evenings now. But before we sign off, tell everyone where they can find both versions of the book and you online to keep an eye out for book 2 when it's ready.
And by the way, I still really enjoy our conversation and feel like this is also sort of relaxing.
Well, that's good. I'm glad I'm not stressing you out.
No, not at all. I always enjoy our conversations. So, no, this has been great. Okay, so you can find print book on your usual places, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I always highly recommend bookshop.org because the proceeds from all those sales go to independent booksellers. And I'm very passionate about this because we had a local independent bookseller just go under this wonderful place in El Dorado Hills that was called Face in a Book. And it is no more, and it makes me very sad. And of course, you can get it hopefully at your local library. And if not, you can look at, there's a website called WorldCat where you can see which libraries it is at. And if it's not at your local library, please feel free to request it. That would be amazing. The ebook also is available through, I believe, Libby and Hoopla and different vendors that do that. And of course, it's also available in ebook on Amazon. As far as the audiobook goes, it is on Audible, and it's on Kobo, and it's on Libro, and it's on Google. I don't think it's on Apple, but I need to double check. It's also on Spotify, and it's also available in audio, I believe, on Hoopla and on, I don't know if it's available on audio yet on Libby, but I'm hoping that happens. It is not yet available on Overdrive, but I'm going to try to do some sleuthing with Jeff as far as why that is, and if there's anything we can do to remove that. If you want the full list of where to find the things, you can always go to my website, and the URL is just www.karenbmccoy.com/book.
I will put a link to your website in the show notes so people can one click and get right there. But yeah, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you have been incredibly busy with a lot going on lately, so I'm glad we were able to connect and chat about this. This was great.
No, I really appreciate this. And yeah, because the author life is, there's a lot of things that I was not expecting. I mean, it's great, but it's a lot of learning a lot of new things quickly.
Absolutely.
And that has been adventurous. But no, I always love our conversations. I would love to be, on a third time if people aren't too tired of me eventually. And yeah, thank you again for having this podcast in this space. I think it's really important, and I love what you're doing.
Well, thank you, and be happy to have you back. We've got to talk about book 2 when it's out.
Yay!
We'll see you again soon, or hear you again soon anyway.
Hopefully so.